Hello, and welcome to our session at the Smithsonian National Education Summit called Stories of Women in STEM, Think Globally, Act Locally. Next slide. My name is Amy D'Amico, and I am the Division Director of Professional Services at the Smithsonian Science Education Center, and I am a woman in STEM. And I am really excited to be here with you for the next 50 minutes and to introduce you to some amazing other women in STEM. Next slide, please. So why is this important? There is a critical need in the United States and abroad for a qualified STEM workforce. Many STEM positions go unfilled. And women represent about 50% of the population. But if you look at the percentage of women in STEM, it's only about 35% of the workforce. So there's a real opportunity here to engage and invite women into the STEM workforce and to engage young girls and young women in STEM disciplines throughout their educational career. Next slide. In order to be able to do this, youth need to see themselves and feel included in STEM. And we need to do that starting very young. So there's an opportunity with educators like yourselves to help to create that environment for girls and young women to go into the STEM workforce and to, frankly, just be scientifically literate so that they can be good sort of contributors to the world in which we live. So over the next 50 minutes, you are going to be introduced to women who think globally and act locally as STEM professionals in different careers. Next slide. And we work with a sort of broad swath of partners and collaborators on the work that we do at the Smithsonian Science Education Center. And we're really pleased to introduce you to three women who are truly invested in their own local communities and thinking about engaging girls and young women in STEM, and themselves are women in STEM. So first, she'll be introduced to Talitha Brown from Johnson & Johnson, followed by Alicia Kowalski from the Aerospace Corporation, and then Jimena Pitti, who we work with regularly from the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Talitha, who is going to tell you a little bit about herself.
Hello, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here. My name is Talitha Brown. I am a director of strategic programs for Johnson & Johnson, and I'm also the little girl that you see on the bottom of that slide. I thought it was really important to share really the beginning of my journey, and it's interesting that Amy talked about children being exposed to STEM really early. I benefited from the fact that both of my parents, pictured here, really fed and nurtured that excitement really early in my journey. I remember having one of those Fisher-Price microscopes and the little Fisher-Price set where you could like catch a bug in it, and it magnified the bee wings and like the ant antlers and like all of the parts of the insects that you could find in the backyard. And for me, that is where my love of science began. It was literally in the home and being able to see things come to life in the backyard, in the garden around me. And so then when I took that learning to school, it was already something that was in me and that was nurtured in the home. So I definitely want to give a shout out to the two people in that picture. And I did share with them that their very young picture is going to be plastered all across this presentation, and they have given their permission. So we'll go to the next slide. As part of that journey, I too tried to carry it on. So these are my children. So if you go furthest right, that's my daughter, Kyra. No matter what the expression on her face said, she really enjoyed Bring Your Child to Work Day that year. I tried really hard to expose them to science and thinking, right? Like there's just so much science that's going on in the world. Just open your mind to the creativity of it. my daughter didn't catch on. I think that was one of very few times that she wanted to come to the lab. But my son in the middle picture, he actually was really excited. So that's a picture on the left of him in ninth grade, where if you look really closely, he actually has a real life microscope that he had access to in the classroom. And that's important because access to things like microscopes, telescopes, pipettes, petri dishes really helps kids make science feel real, right? Like you can touch it, you can see it, you can experience it. And I think that's the difference between thinking that this is something that other people do and something that you can do. So all along my journey, I was really able to connect with science in a very personal way. And one of the goals that I have here at J&J is making sure that I can continue to create that exposure and that opportunity and that visibility for children that don't live in my house, because these two have already decided they're not going to be scientists. As much hope as I had, I've lost that battle, but I continue to fight. And so it's really good for us to think about not just the children in our own house, but all of the children that we touch, to just make science feel interesting and accessible to them. I'll tell you a story about a young woman that was on TikTok talking about makeup. And I said to my daughter, that's like a really cool science, kind of TikTok she made. She's like, that's not science, it's makeup. I'm like, how do you think makeup sticks to your skin? How do you think lip gloss goes on your lip, but you don't choke when you're chewing something and there's lip gloss? Like, all of that is science. Having a chemical that's on your body can go into your body but not cause damage. There's a lot of research that goes into what feels good, what has the right texture. So these are the kinds of ways that you bring science to them so they feel like, oh, I get it, right? This is things that someone has to think about. And if someone has to think about it, and I love makeup, which we can tell that many of our girls do, this is a way to make it closer to them, to make it more accessible. So I really think that we have an opportunity as the adult voices in their lives to say, you're in science every day, whether you know it or not. And maybe you want to know a little bit more about how does that science take place. I had a student once say to me, I went to an all-girls school to speak, and she said, I love science, but I also love art. And like, I don't know if there's a way to make those things go together. There's absolutely a way. There's whole careers in packaging and how do things look, and what are the ways that you decide that, cups are going to be made this way and have this structure and this shape. And so also helping them answer those questions when they have them, and say, like, you can do science and be cool. You can do science and love graphic art. Like, those things are not exclusive. I also think that's a really big opportunity for us. And if I reflect on my story, that's definitely been something that's been common throughout my journey. All of the teachers have said, of course, just try it. Finally, I will share that my first boss in pharma, I was creating a patch for transdermal delivery of a drug. And I wasn't sure about the patch, like how to make it, like what would be the right stickiness versus the right chemical makeup. And he's like, well, just like, there was no drug in it, full disclosure. He's like, just wear it, see how it feels to you. Now, did I break out because I put baking soda in it, which actually like killed the flora on my skin? Yes. But I learned so much from having had the exposure and having had the experience that I'm forever grateful. And it's been over 20 years and I still remember that boss. So I think sometimes just letting them touch it, feel it, see it, makes it real. So we'll go to the next slide. I know I'm running tight on time, Amy. So here at Johnson & Johnson, I think we have very much the same mantra. So the girls that you see in that picture on the left are young girls in Pune, India. And we too are bringing science to them so they can see it, feel it, and touch it. In the middle, we've got volunteers that are committed to not just bringing science to the girls in their house and their neighborhood, but to all of the girls that we can touch through the WAGS program, Women and Girl Guides in Science. And so I do think there's an opportunity for us to get engaged and get involved in whatever community that we build, whether it's a local community or like these volunteers did in India. And then finally, that top right picture, we had a STEM webinar to get voice of customer. Like, what do you think STEM is? How do you think we should bring STEM to women and girls? And we got a lot of really great feedback that helped us shape future programs. So it's really about this. You don't always have one answer. There could be many answers. And the more that we reach out and get other perspectives, the better our programming will be. And so I'm excited that I work in a place that feels very much like that, where that little girl grew up in that first picture, where we're really opening up the opportunities to explore and feel and touch science for more and more girls across the world. And so that is how I act locally and think globally. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Talitha, for sharing your story with us. I'd like to put in a plug really quickly. If you have questions for the panelists, we will have some time for Q&A at the end. So go ahead and pop them in the chat. We are monitoring that. And with that, let's hear from Ashley Kowalski.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Just quick mic check. Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. So my name is Ashley Kowalski. I currently work at a company called the Aerospace Corporation. We have a lot of locations around the US. I'm currently out in Los Angeles. And I have had quite a varied career here. This has been my 10th year here, but I currently work in the International Space Programs division. So basically my day-to-day life is essentially thinking globally, but also acting locally on our scale in our local community. But let me go back to that in a second. So yeah, as I said, so I am in the International Programs Division, which means that we support different military divisions. So currently I support Space Systems Command. And we are basically the technical guidance for a lot of the decisions that are made on an engineering level. And in addition to that, I have also had a lot of different human spaceflight interests, which is what you're seeing on the slide right now. There's a few pictures from different astronaut analog missions that I've done in the past. I'll explain that in 1 second. But as you can see, there's a lot of different aspects to what can be done in the space industry, varying from satellites to human spaceflight, to subsystems like control systems. But as Talitha was mentioning before, there is a lot of other types of paths that you can go as well. So that includes the graphic design, that includes the corporate communications, that includes the legal system, the policy systems, and everything like that. And so it's really one big ecosystem. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of a background of the industry that I come from. I mentioned earlier that, I've always wanted to do a more international type of focused career, but I always had this desire also to make sure that I was still engaging in the science and math that I so enjoyed doing, but I also wanted to kind of marry that with my love of languages and my love of the arts. And as Talitha mentioned before, they all go hand in hand. I was really fortunate to be able to kind of utilize a lot of the theater and and dance and artistic endeavors I had in my actual career as well. So I grew up, taking dance classes, doing these types of theater events. And I learned a lot about like public speaking, how to really present yourself, how to, engage with different people, how to communicate with different types of personalities. And that's all fed into my career today. Now, I'd like to also touch a little bit more on some of the fun human spaceflight astronaut analog stuff. As I mentioned, those are what the pictures are up there right now. So that was an experience where, we're trying to learn more and more about how how the human body changes physiologically and biologically and emotionally, physically, to isolated and confined environments as we go for longer and longer human spaceflight missions. And so the picture on the left in the orange suit, that is when I was doing an 8-month isolation mission abroad. It was in Moscow, Russia, and I was representing NASA. And that was one of the most interesting experiences I've had so far in my career, actually. It was one where, you have you engage in your diplomatic side as well, because you're dealing with a multilingual, multicultural environment. You're also engaging with the technical aspect of the job, with the engineering, the science, and the math. And then, you're also engaging with that, again, like that artistic speaking and presenting yourself aspect as well. So when you're engaging with the media, when you're engaging with the different schools that we engaged with the students, with the presentations we did before and after and during these different analog environments. So I'm really fortunate to be able to have been able to marry all of those things in my career. And I say all these things because I want to highlight that it really does come full circle, and it can be incorporated. I did go to an all-girls school growing up. And so, while our school wasn't necessarily at the time extremely STEM focused, I did have really great science and math teachers that really were probably some of the hardest teachers I had in high school, but they were the ones that really encouraged me and pushed me to pursue the STEM field. It's something that never really crossed my mind growing up. It was something that I kind of expected maybe, to do something more in the liberal arts, or actually doing a performing arts degree or something like that. I never really, from the very beginning, thought I would go into engineering, and I'm really happy I did, and it's really thanks to those teachers that I had. Give a shout out to Mrs. Potts specifically. She really pushed the boundaries for us and learned and taught me how to really love this aspect of logic and problem solving, and seeking out solving harder problems. And I really always had this uncertainty about where my path was going to go, and even to this day I still feel like I have these different aspects of me, but it's very important and very it's very possible, we'll just say, within this field to really kind of create a path and connection to all of these different interests. Is there another to go to the next? Is there another slide there, or? Not sure. Yeah, so there's a couple more pictures. So there on the left side is our analog crew here at Aerospace Corporation when we did a 2-week astronaut analog mission. That was to show the operational aspects of human long-duration human spaceflight, going actually out into the field, picking up samples, doing more of like the physical operational aspects of science. And then on the right, those two are again from the 8-month mission that I did in Moscow, where it was more dealing with the psychological aspects. And so I have these two as a juxtaposition as well, because again, as we go into as we send humans up into space for longer and longer human spaceflight missions, it's not about just being the most physically fit or the most academically, fit astronaut. I mean, of course, we need those aspects, but there is still an aspect of psychological resiliency for those. And so, for example, we need to see how can we use different methods to mitigate the effects of psychological issues developing in those missions. And that's where the arts idea comes in as well. So when we were in this isolation, we had these virtual reality simulators where, we could put the goggles on and, draw in front of us. If we wanted to draw some kind of picture or just be a little bit more creative, or, if we wanted to put the virtual reality headset on and kind of escape into a different environment. So there were some like nature environments that we could do, or maybe it was more of like a space kind of trip, or you could put pictures of, your close family and friends on this virtual reality headset. There's different ways to incorporate these different graphics, these different artistic outlets into these different spaceflight missions. And it's something that's going to be very, very important for the health of our astronauts as we go forward. And so, I'm kind of going on a rant here, I guess, but it's it's I'm not sure. Is there one more slide there or? Yeah, I guess we can, yeah. So basically, I'll just wrap it up really fast. My career has kind of taken this roundabout path. It's really never been a straight shot. Sometimes I still wonder to myself, what am I doing when I grow up? But, I'm very fortunate, and I want to encourage the rest of the population here to say that, it's not a black and white thing. STEM is not something that it's only math and science, that it's only the hard solving of numbers problems, that it's only for those who are good with their machinery and tools and things like this. There is a place for everybody in these fields. There is a place for linguists. There is a place for graphic designers. There is a place for educators. There is a place for folks that want to be lawyers, folks that want to be in media, corporate communications, people that want to, and of course, the side that if you do want to be very technical, of course, this is where it is. So it's something that I just always want to reiterate to the younger students out there that, there is a place for everybody in these fields, and it's not just only, it's not just that you have to be in a science and engineering field to be a part of the science and engineering community. So I will stop there for now. I think that's it for the slides, probably, yeah. So I'll stop right there and I'll wait for questions later.
Thank you, Ashley. And I'm not sure if you click one more time, if there's some pictures that pop up as part of that slide. Perhaps not. Okay. There they go. Keep going.
There we go. That's our full crew from the analog mission. So we had 2 Russians, 2 Americans, and 1 from the United Arab Emirates. It was a truly unique experience that really tied in everything all together. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. And yes, we will have some Q&A at the end, so keep the questions coming. And we will hear a little bit from Jimena Pitti, who is coming to us from Panama and the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute.
Thank you, Amy. Those were great stories. Thank you so much for sharing, Talitha and Ashley. So my own story, I wanted to do this as a mood board. I actually had a friend who did a mood board for me a few days ago. I didn't even know much about it, but I was like, I'm going to do something like this for my presentation. So my name is Jimena. I am a manager for education and public programs at Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. That's in Panama. And I also, one part of my work includes strategizing for how do we make it crazier for people to like science, just in a nutshell? Like, how do we make it attractive to people that science is cool? Like, how do we sell it? So part of my work is to be able to look for funding for that programming, to be able to sell that. And I also supervise visitor centers at the Smithsonian in different parts of Panama that have education programming. I work with an amazing team of humanoids, that I like to call them. These Homo sapiens, they save my life every day, and I am very, very grateful. I couldn't do it without them. And of course, we couldn't do without the beautiful biodiversity that we have in Panama as well. Some of them are in our exhibits, and some of them are just wandering around the visitor center. So next slide. Thank you. So the question was, how are we working locally to impact globally? So like I said, I'm Panamanian. I work in Panama. Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute is a unit. It's one unit at Smithsonian who's actually outside the US. Panama itself is an isthmus. And as an isthmus, as you can see it there, it's when it rose from the waters because of volcanic activity, that little patch of land impacted the whole global scheme, from temperature, water currents, wind patterns, etc. So that little more than 75,000 square kilometers impacted the whole world. So I was like, if we are such a tiny country and it made such a big impact, how can we also kind of do the same? So what's popular in Panama? The Panama Canal, right? So again, in those 80 kilometers across the Panama and its belt in the middle of it, we have an activity that impacts the economy globally. So again, going back to these models, like how can we do that as well? So within the space that we're at, we do a lot of activities that are focused in Panama, but also bilingual, with a lot of international or foreign visitors coming through our doors. We also have partners in different parts of the world, mostly because we know that the tropics is all around the world. We can actually strategize and say, hey, we have people in the other side of the world, people in Africa and Asia. We can make connections and see what they're doing. Of course, with our colleagues up in the US, SSCC, and other units that we've worked together in the past, those are also great models to follow and actually work with. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, many of what we do is focused on programming in different visitor centers. We have Punta Culebra, we have Barro Colorado, which is one of the most studied tropical site in the world. And also in the Caribbean side, those of you who want to visit Panama, it's a beautiful place to be. I know a lot of my colleagues, including Amy, have been wanting to come down here. We'd love to have you. Panama is such a rich, biodiverse country, and that is one of the reasons why Smithsonian decided to come in here during the construction of that canal, because there was so much information, so much knowledge, data that was coming out of this small little country that needed to be studied. Next slide. And also part of what I do is create exhibits together with my colleagues at the communications department. So we convince some of our scientists to actually come into the dark side of education and public programming and share the science with different audiences. As I said, we have from local to foreign visitors, and what we do is pretty fun. We try to say, hey, science can be relevant through policy, can be relevant through conservation, et cetera. And in this case scenario, we have a perfect example of that. We have the humpback whales, and that's a great connection that we have north, south, and we are in the middle. So you have these migratory animals like birds, like butterflies, many other animals that make those connections. So that is another way how we can impact or make conversation with people that are not from Panama or live in Panama, but they have seen the humpback whales in their home country or where they've traveled. So that's an example of another connection. Next slide, please. So because we can't be in one place, we like to spread the word. We also have programming that travels to different schools in different parts of Panama. So right now so in Panama, we have 10 provinces, and we're traveling to around 7 provinces right now. It's like the states in the US. And what we do is pretty much pack very fun microscopes and other scientific technology and activities and whatnot. And we just bring it to schools and share that with our audiences. They are teachers or students, et cetera. And like Talitha mentioned, like technology, those tools make such an impact. And even when we pack scientists, yes, I said pack scientists, the impact that it does with boys and girls, but mostly girls. We have a testimony from a little girl from 6th grade saying, I did not know I could be that person. I did not know I can be her. So the impact that has is incredible. Next slide, please. And because of COVID, we have to pivot to online type of connection. So we are also in the digital world, and that has allowed us access to different countries, different areas that we never thought we were going to be able to get to. And we've gotten feedback. Actually, we have one of the most visited sites in all of the STRI website, which is the Megalodon. And I would love for you guys to visit it. I think I have a link at the end of my presentation. So I'm going to go a little faster now and talk a little bit and bore you a little bit with my own personal story. Next slide, please. So that's my dad on the left with another doctor back in the 80s. And he's a surgeon. He's a cardiovascular surgeon. And for me personally, he was a great model. I know I should be saying a woman, right? But in my case scenario, I'm surrounded by doctors and mostly male doctors in my family. And let me tell you, Latin American families, we have like uncles and aunts to spare, so loads. But I also had a chemistry science teacher in high school who was, I thought I was going to go into chemistry, but I always loved biology. So she was also an inspiration to me. Sadly, I don't have a photo of her, but she's always in my heart. And I really hope I'm really close by to my old school. I went to an all girls school like Ashley as well. So hopefully I'll run into her someday. But then I ventured into political science in Latin American Caribbean affairs. I was like, I am going to work on policy, and I am going to go into UNICEF and save the children and work with children and all this jazz. So I worked there for 6 years in Panama and Brazil, and I had an array of young women leaders that for me were such models that I, to this day, still keep in contact with them. A shout out if you guys are listening to this. And they were these leaders in policy and child rights and equal rights and whatnot. And I was like, I want this. Next slide, please. But my real passion was always to be a marine biologist. And sadly, that did not happen because a lot of noise around, people saying like, no, are you crazy? You're going to live with your parents. You're going to, financially depend on them for your whole life. And I was like, I mean, you're 17, making big decisions at that time. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to go into political science because that pays more, right? Next slide, please. Yeah, there you go. Just people just breaking my hearts. Next slide, please. So I was, in Spanish, we say necia. So I was stubborn, and I was like, no, I'm going to go into science. I have to go back into science. So I thought I was very old to go back into science back in my late 20s. So I was like, I ventured into science education, and I loved it. I was a high school teacher for AP environmental science after my master's that I did environmental science. And I did, and then also I taught biology. And then I got this amazing job at like an amazing institution here in Panama, STRI, Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, that had my name stamped on it. I had science education specialist. My boyfriend at the time was my husband now. He worked at STRI. He's like, this is for you. It's got your name on it. I'm like, I'm applying right now. And I got it. So see how excited I am? I'm so excited. So I worked there for like 5 minutes doing that, and then became a manager for the rest of my time at STRI, who's been like 9 years now. And I've been doing all kinds of crazy things, traveling to Washington and meeting these wonderful, beautiful people, and going to Barro Colorado in the middle of the island, bringing back ticks to my house, all that jazz, and playing with puppets and having these wonderful conversations with awesome colleagues all around the world. So yes, I have to say it's been fun. But I want to do a plug-in, which is going to be the next slide real quick. Amy was talking about stats in the US, but in the next slide, you're going to see that I'm going to just very, very briefly touch on Latin America. So just to give you a brief explanation, 4 out of 10 graduates in STEM are women in Latin America. And 48% of that, which is the female share, is for my country here in Panama. So we still have some work to do. We're still, trying. 10 years ago was much less than this, but there are countries, as you see, Trinidad and Tobago and others, that still need to, that little push. So I think also kind of seeing the next slide, it's a model for me personally. Her, as you can see, this little girl, I often have her in my presentations, Ana Patricia. So Ana Patricia is a daughter of a former colleague of ours, and Ana Patricia discovered, next click, please, discovered this little guy that you see right here, which is kind of a bug, very, very close to the bed bugs. And this guy right here is actually introduced from Asia. And it wasn't seen in the Western Hemisphere ever. And she discovered it for the first time. So she told her mom, and her mom took a picture and sent it over to STRI. Of course, we're surrounded by scientists, right? And they made a paper after her discovery. So if this is not something to inspire you to continue sparking curiosity and discovery, because I'm sure you guys do it all the time, I don't know what it is. So with that, I thank you for listening to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jimena. I mean, that's a tough story to follow. So we have, in the time remaining, we have about 10 minutes. We've seen some questions pop up in the chat, so feel free to keep those coming. And I will direct some questions to the individuals who are on our panel if we want to pull everybody up. So Talitha, you mentioned that your kids don't necessarily want to pursue STEM. How do you still support them in learning and leaning into any field of study?
I don't give them any money until they change. No. I do think that the theme in our household, and they're both in college now, has really been STEM and science is about curiosity. It's about following the path. And so in whatever way that you do that, it's really about understanding it's a science of inquiry, right? So why does that happen? What are the causes? And so my daughter is interested in public policy. So Jimena, definitely like you, and we didn't push her. She ran towards political science, but she's interested in the root of how did we get here? What were the things that happened before that put us in this situation? And so I do think there is a bit of the inquiry base that is still there. And my son is interested in business, and it's very much the same, right? What are the parts of the economy that happen now, but started 5 years ago because of some change that happened? And so it's really about helping them to understand the importance of inquiry and asking questions, and not taking the thing they see now as, oh, well, that's just how it happens. No, there was a root somewhere. And so how do you pull that through? And that for me is seeing those ahas for them. That's the benefit. And that's as close as I'm going to get to a scientific experience. And so I'm soaking it up.
Thank you. And, there is science in political science, maybe. Ashley, for you, I have a two-parter. The first part of the question, have you ever been in space?
No, I have not yet been into space. I have submitted my application for the NASA astronaut application, but I have not been there yet. So I am still working towards that goal.
Excellent. So you mentioned you went to an all-girls school. I actually also went to an all-girls school for high school, which is sort of interesting that many of us have had that experience. And all-girls schools can be, really supportive. Did you still encounter adults that didn't support you and women going into STEM careers? And how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think I personally was really lucky in that in my early years, I feel like whenever I had some kind of crazy idea, it would mostly be supported. I think in the early years. I think it was more in the later years, actually, when I kind of got deeper in my career, is when I started noticing more of the maybe there was bias, maybe there was a little bit of imbalance in the work meetings. I mean, still to this day, there's often times when I walk into a conference meeting, and maybe I'm the only female in the room, right? So, I'd say like early on, I was very lucky in being supported by, my parents, my sister, by my teachers, by any other role models I had in the area, in my I mentioned I did dance, growing up, whether it was, the ballet stuff or like the Polish folk dancing that I did growing up. My parents are immigrants from Poland, so I have to shout out to them. They did always encourage me to do whatever I wanted to, and they tried to always make it happen, no matter how difficult maybe it was or how time consuming it was. They always made sure to try to help me make my dreams come true too. So early on, definitely a lot of support, and I think that kind of helped me kind of gain my confidence, so that I can I kind of had this, well, I can do it mentality. Why not? Like, why wouldn't I try it? So, and even going into college, I mentioned earlier on that, I didn't necessarily know for sure, still even going into college, that I wanted to do engineering. Like, I figured, I should try it. I mean, why not? Like, I like math and science, so why not try it? And if you know what, if I really hate it, there's nothing wrong in saying I'd like to switch. It's not a failure. It's just, hey, I just decided it's not my thing, really, right? So that confidence kind of like pushed me into it, and then I liked it, and then there's still a lot of support that I get today, obviously, and continuing this stuff. But yeah, it's kind of funny how it's later in life that sometimes you encounter a lot of the differences, but I can't complain. My company has been very supportive with, providing different mentors, different age ranges of mentors, different diversity of mentors. And so I've really gotten to have a lot of experiences and hear a lot of people's stories. And I think that keeps supporting me and helping me to push me towards my goals. I feel like I have a lot of people on my side kind of cheering me on.
That's great. I'm sort of noticing a bit of a common theme. Jimena, you had mentioned that people's reactions to you, wanting to be a marine scientist, and that there was sort of a lot of maybe negative noise. How did you find the power to sort of pursue what you wanted and not just sort of please others?
Actually, I have a funny story about that. I decided to quit my job at the United Nations 5 years in, and I was like, I don't have a plan. I don't know what I want to do. I know there's something out there for me, and I quit my job, cashed all my savings, and moved to Brazil, just like that. My dad wanted to kill me. And it was not something that we're used to seeing from their daughter, who tries to plan ahead some things and has worked since she was 18 and etc. So that gave me kind of the power to say, hey, if I did something like this without a plan, without thinking, I'm not asking, my kids to do that, although, but it gives you another perspective of life, of like, and I had such a great time in Brazil. I worked there too. I worked there for a year. I was lucky enough to find a job. Not that I was looking for it, but they knew me at the United Nations there. And it was like, hey, you want to come work with us? I'm like, sure. So it was, I think, that combination of things that made me think, hey, how about I just, break those chains of being nervous about doing something because I feel too old to do it or whatever it is, and just try something different. So I found this wonderful master's in Spain, and then Australia. I was between Australia and Spain. Such a big decision, but it was amazing because it was actually what I wanted to do, and I did it. I went to Spain for doing my master's. Came back to Panama. I was like, well, what next? And I got like this a temporary job as a covering for maternity leave for a biology teacher. And I never thought I was going to enjoy teaching science in high school. And because everybody had said at some point, like, high school, you're not going to survive that. So shout out to all those teachers out there, all of you guys, especially high school, because it's quite a task. However, it was the most amazing experience for me. And then I feel like just seeing it now, in my 40s, looking back at that, girl that was making that decision at 17, then in her 20s. And even now, I'm just like, don't be afraid. The sky's the limit. There's so much to do and so little time to do it. Right. So thank you for that question.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question of all of you. I'm going to start with Talitha. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self?
That's a good question, because I started college at 16, so I didn't know a whole lot of stuff at that point. I think for me, and it's the same advice that I would give to young women now. The job that is the right fit for you has not even been created yet. And so don't set your goal on a place, set your mind on the journey. And I am the Director of Strategic Programs and Patient Experience and Customer Solutions. I had no idea what that was when I started college, right? I thought I was going to work in a laboratory all of my science days. And so there is really, I love that Jimena said, like, it's kind of like breaking the change of expectation, both from your family and from yourself, and just dreaming a little bit bigger. I think if there's anything that we can give to our kids, our students, our young people in the next 10 years, it's that anything is possible and no one is coming to save you. You've got to be the creative force to see a new planet. It's hot, guys. If we're going to figure out how to be cooler, how to have more sustainable items, how to have better fabrics, how to have better textiles, we're going to have to figure it out. And I do believe we have all that we need. We just got to think big.
Thank you. Ashley, what advice would you give your 16-year-old self?
I think it would mostly be to, and I don't want to kind of copy Talitha too much here, but my answer is kind of to think outside the box a little bit more, because I think early on when you're in high school and middle school and even elementary school, you're kind of taught that there is a lot of these like traditional careers. I mean, gosh, I remember when as a kid, it was either you're a doctor, a teacher, or a lawyer. Those are pretty much the three. I didn't even know engineering was an option, right? And so, it seems like, while I feel like I did expand outside of that box a little bit, I think if I had even pushed the boundaries a little bit more, I could have ended up in somewhere totally different, or I could have, I could have done even more, I guess. But just think outside the box a little bit more. Don't pigeonhole yourself into what you think you should do. I think a lot of times also, we're motivated by what people say. Oh, it's going to be a steady job. Oh, it's going to be a well-paying job. Oh, it's going to be the right path. And this is what, you should follow in your so-and-so's footsteps. I mean, the amount of times that, people told me that I was crazy for pursuing some programs because maybe it would affect me in a different way down the road, or not in the best way that I thought. They were all wrong. If anything, those crazy risks that I took were the ones that helped propel my career into a path that I never thought it would go. I wouldn't be able to tell, 18-year-old self even, or 14-year-old Ashley back in the day, that I'd be traveling the world, almost every month, talking about space topics with different countries. I had no idea that's where I would end up. And here I am. I mean, who could have told, young Ashley also that you'd be applying for the NASA astronaut application? I mean, I think anybody, when their kid tells them that they want to be an astronaut, I mean, how crazy does that sound to a parent sometimes? And really, why not? It's all within the realm of possibilities. So yeah, just think outside the box and don't sell yourself short.
Thank you. Jimena, you have 1 minute.
Yes, I would just tell myself, hey, an advice is just an advice. You don't have to take it. And it's just inquire, ask, outside the box, like Ashley mentioned. It's just, there's so many, one door opens 1,000 many other doors. So just don't cluster yourself in one box. There's a whole world out there. And like Talitha said, we're not going to change the world if we just keep doing what everybody else is doing. All those great inventors and creators, they were all outside the box and not doing exactly what people were telling them to do. And definitely not from their mother and father, or their teachers. But that's another conversation. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, volunteering your time to spend this 50 minutes with us. You all have truly inspiring stories, and I love moderating these sessions and learning from all of you. There are lots of free resources that are available. There's a Women in STEM ebook series that features women in space, women in biotechnology, women in energy, we also have YSTEM 2D activities that have been developed through our Johnson & Johnson collaboration. Smithsonian Science for Global Goals is a community-based sort of curricular resource to really engage youth to be sort of agents of change in their own communities. And I would also encourage all of you to attend the final closing keynote speaker, who is a young inventor, who is a woman in STEM, 18-year-old inventor who has literally done more in the 18 years on the earth than I have in my 48 years, but she has designed and developed a device for early diagnosis of prescription opioid addiction using genetic engineering, as well as an anti-cyberbullying service using AI and natural language processing. So please do tune in for that. And thank you all for coming and joining us for this session.